Hello YouTube, how are we all doing today? Hope you're doing well. Useful links will be found in the description. I was racing at Zolder and I noticed I don't have a good setup. In fact, I have none. So I thought about making a video on how to set up a car. And this will be done in 3 tries. So to start, you have to understand that every car is different. And what helped me massively is joining Aris Drive's Discord. In the Discord is a bot which you can state your problems to. It is very limited, but with enough work you can get a basic understanding about setting up your car. I know it helped me a lot on my journey about getting my setups better, and you have to also understand that making a setup is a long process. It takes quite a bit of effort, and you might also notice that if you get rid of one problem, another problem might arise. It's all about finding the right balance. But with all that being said, it pays off in the long run because you can set up your own car instead of relying on someone else's setup. Most of the people you see on the internet will tell you to go with the aggressive setup, which is of course not too bad. In fact, it is a pretty solid strategy. I, however, like to go with the safe setup. I don't know if this works for every car, but it does so for the Mercedes. So usually I just tend to try and guess the correct tire pressures on the spot. This is of course going to differ per track and you'll get used to it. So maybe something like this. The left front is going to suffer a lot here on Zolder. So usually I start off with lowering the front ride height and I tend to start at 45. But for now I'll keep it at 47. And of course this is going to differ for everyone. Then it's going to be for a 20-minute race, so you'll need about 35 to 38 liters of fuel. I already know this tends to be off on the safe setup, so I'll put the map at 10, allow the MoTech data to be generated, and I'll adjust the traction control ABS as well as the brake bias on the spot while we're driving. So already a lot to take in, and this is just based off my experience, so leave the rest as it is and we go out for a drive. What you want to do if you go out making a setup is trying to understand your car. It will behave differently in different corners. So oversteer in slow corners and maybe understeer in high speed corners. You can differentiate the corners into phases. So we have corner entry, corner apex and corner exit. So this is the entry, apex and exit. Of course this is going to differ from every corner. For now, I'll see you back in a few minutes when the tires are up to temperature, and I'll show you a lap here around Zolder and where to look at. So here we are, the tires approaching their operating window, and you always want to make sure you have your tire pressures right. Then we have oversteer and understeer, where oversteer is your car starting to drift or where your rear wants to overtake the front. If this happens, it means that your rear does not have enough grip. So the front has more grip than the rear, and so the rear starts to slide out. So the other way around then, if your rear end has more grip than the front, the car will understeer, so it does not want to turn in. It could also mean the car just drives out wide on the exit of the corner. And that is why we separate the corner into the phases. Like we said earlier, the corner entry, the corner apex and the corner exit. So again, a lot to take in, but the more you work with it, the better it will stick. And you might find yourself getting stuck on a setup, and sometimes it's better to just leave it alone and start with another. At some point the mechanics of the game will click and you will find yourself adjusting your car to your liking more and more, and you will need less steps to do so. So basically just skipping ahead a step like I did in the beginning here, with lowering the front and guessing the tire pressure somewhere good. At this point of the game you want to have your tires somewhere around 27.6, but definitely not under 27 or above 28. So between 27.3 and 27.9 is where you want to aim at. And this, however, might change with another version of the game, so keep that in mind. So driver inputs are very important when it comes to setup. So if you are not consistent with your driving, you might find yourself adjusting the setup, but in fact it could be your driving which is the problem. But the car is not looking too bad. I'm going to dial down the traction control and ABS. So there we had some massive oversteer, and that is probably because of the fact we just lowered the traction control. So I will not touch the brake bias until I got somewhat rid of the oversteer. Because if I go lower on the brake bias, it will just invite more rotation, so we'll keep it at 61. And I think at this point it is the front end biting a bit too much in the ground under braking. Probably because the bump stop range is too high. It could also mean the suspension is too soft. And this is where the discard pod from Aris Drive comes in. So the grip at the front will probably be too much, which will result in your car not wanting to turn in. It basically just goes straight. So if that happens in a slow corner, for example, you can then go ahead to the discard, put in understeer on corner entry, and then it will give you possibilities to change the car. So when you brake, the load of the car starts to go at the front, and if you accelerate, the load of the car will start to move to the back, which we also call car pitch. And when you take a right hand corner, it will start to load to the left, and the same for a left hand corner, the load will go to the right. And this we call the car roll. I mean, the car is not too bad at all. Can go around pretty nicely. Running a 10th in sector 1. And here at the chicane I noticed that my car doesn't want to turn in and more or less slides into the corner. So that might indicate some slow corner understeer on corner entry. I was a bit late on the brakes, so that might also be a factor there. So you really have to nail your driving and then think about how the car feels like. So up 2.5 tenths at the entry of the chicane here, and then 4 tenths at the entry of the hairpin. The other car feels pretty good already. That was with only lowering the traction control, ABS, and lowering the front, and also the engine map, as well as setting up the tire pressures. So that's going to be a 129.77. Now from experience I knew where my tire pressures were supposed to be, but if you're new, just drive 3 laps and see where your hot pressures are. We don't want to set the cold pressures at 27.6 because then they will be overinflated, probably going into 28 or maybe even 29, which is way too high. So coming in to the setup screen, you first want to address your tire settings. You want to make sure you have them right all the time. That really is the basic. You have to get down. So turn this down, check the tire pressures, go 1 down, go 1 up, go 2 down, go 4 down. Then I think the camber is way too low both at the rear and at the front. So we'll go up by 1 full negative camber, and here just 1 click more. You could go full at the front probably. Just for the sake of the video, I'll just try to do it step by step, more or less. So then the oversteer, I think this is way too much. Too soft spring at the front. So go up 1 click and then go to 10 at first. And the Discord bot will tell you to do only 1 modification at a time, but I think I'm comfortable enough to do more. But yeah, big changes in the setup will result in big changes in the behavior of the car. So if you start, don't go too wild. The anti-roll bar is a bit low. and at the rear a bit high. Preload I tend to run at 50 and then adjust from there, so we'll try that as well. And I think with the high speed corners here at Zolder, we're going to put this at 15, and because we stiffened the front, there's more stability. I think we are going to go down to 59 on the brake bias as well, and to not let the rear rotate too much, I guess we go up by 1 click at the bump stop rate, which should help with a bit of stability. Then the aero at 1.2 now, I think 2 clicks at the rear. Then lower the rear to 45, and I guess 0.6 is where I want to try it, so something like this should be enough to maybe go up of the time. But again, I mean, this isn't really a good time, but this is also pretty unusual. But yeah, 129.772 on the safe setup with just the front lowered down a bit, which is already pretty drivable. But let's hope we did some changes for the better, and hopefully we can improve the time. So now I'll just get some heat into the tires, and I'll see you back in a few laps. You don't want to look into the car's behavior too much when the tires are cold. A cold tire is a nervous tire. So now that there is getting some heat into tires and they are going to get into operating window, we can have a look again at what the car is doing at, again, the corner entry, corner apex and corner exit. And I also have to make a side note here that this is live recorded, and trying to speak English and drive at the same time takes away a huge portion of my brain capacity. So yeah, my driving might be a bit off. And at the end of the video you will find some times I did after this recording. So regarding to the tire pressures, the closer to the 27.6 the better. If you go too low or too high, it will just take away from the drivability of the car. Of course, this might depend on which version of the game we're at, and in April we are going to get a huge update, in case you didn't know. So yeah, now for trying to understand what the car does. Let's see. So far so good, it seems pretty stable, already coming close to the best lap we did the last time. Doesn't yet oversteer on the corner exit. And of course this video is not really about getting a good lap time, but more so consistent lap times, which is more important than fast lap times. It's really easy to stare blind at lap times, and it feels good if you improve your lap times, but in the end, in a race, it's about consistent lap times. Just keep it on the grey stuff and you'll be fine. A little bit slow there, a bit of understeer out of the corner. Yeah, I think that's really what's going to bite us now, the understeer. So yeah, we got rid of the oversteer and now we are starting to experience understeer. And again, it's about finding the right balance between them. There is no perfect setup. Pretty good through the chicane, and the last stint the car bottomed out at the chicane in the second, but now it's a little bit less. And that is thanks to stiffening the front wheel spring rate. So what stiffening the front wheel spring rate does is just making the spring harder to compress. The same goes for the rear spring rate, of course. And you want to generally keep them even at both sides of the car. So left and right, and front and rear doesn't really matter. Time 130.13. So not yet up from the safe setup time. But yeah, I think overall the car got a little bit better, but it is slightly harder to drive. Still trying to get an understanding of the car. So then for types of tracks, at twisty tracks like Hungaroring or here at Zolder for example, you want to have a high rake of the car. And what rake means essentially is the difference between front and rear, right height. And that means the front is lower and the rear a bit higher, so that the weight balance shifts a bit more to the front, so it makes the car a bit easier to turn in. So the opposite goes for Monza for example, where you don't have a lot of corners and you can get away with a lower ride height and generally a lot less downforce. So I think here at Zolder it's medium to high downforce, and Monza is very low, and the high rate will give you more oversteer. 3/10 up right now, so we are finding some time here and there. 3/10 in this lap. 29.5 basically. 2/10 in the first sector, not bad. So yeah, I think we made the car yet again a little bit faster, but also starting to notice the car is a little bit nervous sometimes on the corner exit. Just a little bit though, not too much. And here we can see an example of that being the case. Just a little bit of oversteer. But still, we're up on the fastest time, so it's not all too bad. Pretty much manageable. And also it comes down to how much you can handle. A more experienced driver can handle more rake than a beginner. Lost a bit in sector 2 and also in 3. Can keep the car nice and easy under control, which is what you want. You don't want a car that is too hard to handle, especially in a race. But you also don't want a car which understeers in every single corner. Again, almost the same time, so 29.5 again. Let's do one more for good measure. Hit the chicane there, but it's not too bad. Understeer out of the corner. It wasn't the best drive out of the corner as well, but still on power, quite a bit of understeer on slow corner exit. So yeah, the car tends to understeer a bit now. 1 minute 30. So what are the times? Setting the fastest sectors. So I think overall the car got a little bit better. And we set 2 good laps here. So if we can get consistent around here, it should make some pretty good racing. So for the understeer, I'm going to open up the front camber, close down, open up. I think it's open up. Yeah, don't have to change too much. So again, to 26.6. I'm quite confident in my ability to keep the tires around here. If you slide a lot more, you might want to go 2 clicks down, so that if you slide, your tires won't overheat. And then also regarding to the tire pressure, if you start to push your car is going to slide more, and so the heat will go up. And yeah, that is something to keep in mind as well. So how to reduce the understeer? I think going down on the anti-roll bar, 2 clicks on here. We don't want to change the car too much now because we like it this way. So we stick with a few clicks instead of the 10 we did earlier. This should make it a little bit less understeery, but it might invite some oversteer as well. So I think the 0.6 where we're at is pretty good, the car, and I hope that this stint we can get somewhere around here consistently. So yeah, we go out again and get some heat in the tires. So that was lap 1, still getting some heat in. I'll see you the next lap. So now that the tires are pretty much up to temperature, we can go ahead and start analyzing the car and its behavior on the corner faces. I noticed that the car is bottoming out in the chicane. And I noticed that I braked too late there. Overall the car seems pretty stable, tire pressures are almost spot on. Car slightly oversteering now. It's only natural if you try to get rid of understeer. If you get rid of the understeer, the car will oversteer a bit more. That's just the way it is. It's not that the car will, but the chances are a bit higher. A bit late on the brakes again. So not too far off, 129.75. So yeah, I'm a little bit nervous there on the corner entry of that fast right-hander. A little bit better through the chicane and the delta going down, so if I drive just a tiny bit better, I'm sure I can find some time. Hook up your right wheel with that inside curb for the best line and some extra rotation. Make sure to hit the apex there. You always want to hit every single apex, but that is not easy. Here again, finding half a tenth. So if I drive just a little bit better, I'm sure I can get the time down. Here as well, finding, I think I released the brake a little bit too early, too sudden. Something, then a little bit uneasy on the exit there. So the trial braking was not on point, which resulted in my car being out of control. Losing 2/10 in the first sector. Finding a temp on the entry of the chicane, but the exit is not as good as it was in my fastest lap. That's fine though. So sometimes at the corner exit, for example here, you can see the traction control there on the dashboard lighting up, which just means the traction control is interfering and stopping your wheels from spinning. And the same then for the ABS under braking. If we brake, the light of the ABS there on the dashboard will go yellow. That basically means that if we didn't have the ABS control, we would lock up the wheels. So the ABS stops your wheel from locking up, and the traction control prevents your wheels from spinning too much. It tends to go to the oversteery side on slow exit corners. And here as well then, the engine's rotating a bit too much for my liking, being out of control, which then results in having a not so great exit. So to get a bit better balance, I have to limit the oversteer. So 130, the times have not really been all that different, I think. Yeah, basically the same. So yeah, I lost half a second. So 129.1 potentially. But yeah, I think still a bit too much oversteer. Increasing the rate will give a little bit more stability. And at this point it's pretty much fine tuning. Oversteer, I think one click on the rear wing will help a bit. Keeping the stability to somewhat keep the front aero variation similar to the 0.6. And then I guess go one click down on the range as well. So we'll try it for one more spin. So out of the pit we go, and as you can see I already did quite a few laps, so think about all the practice you are getting in if you are working on setups. So that was lap 1, I'll see you the next lap. Here we are then. So yeah, the tires are nice up to temperature. I think I've mentioned brake bias, but I have not adjusted the brake bias because I think 59 is a pretty solid place to have right now on the setup. It was at 61, so I did slightly adjust it, but not really experiencing problems. Still a bit of understeer there on the corner exit, and brake bias will only affect the corner entry, not the corner exit. It could, however, affect the corner exit, because on the corner entry you can rotate your car just a bit more, which could potentially give you a better exit. Brake bias does, however, not affect the on-power understeer, and on-power meaning accelerating. So now we got rid of the oversteer. We are starting to experience some understeer. Like I said, it's just the way it is. It's about finding the right balance between all of the things that occurred making a setup. So it's all about making the right compromise between the ride height, the brake bias and everything else I've just mentioned. And even more, of course, with the damping and whatnot. So now that we experience understeer, both on corner entry and corner exit, we could try to lower the brake bias a little bit, see if that might help. So funny, now that I just mentioned the brake bias, I felt myself adjusting it now. And I think I've said it, but the lower you go, so more against towards the 50, more of a handbrake feel you will experience. So what that means basically is the lower you go, the more your rear wants to rotate under braking, or overtake your front if you want to put it like that, or slip away under you. The higher you go, the more understeer you will get with entering a corner. So if you find your rear slipping away under you, under braking, try to raise your brake bias a bit towards the 60. If you do the opposite, it will switch to oversteer or understeer, depending on which way you're going with it, obviously. And there is not really a magical number for the brake bias. It's more adjusted by feel. So one setup could use brake bias 56 for example, but if you run 56 on another setup, it will suddenly feel totally different because of how the car is set up. So yeah, there is not a magical number for the brake bias, but it is more adjusted by feel. And you can also bind it to your wheel. Yeah, it's really weird how it works, but it just works, you know. So lower number, handbrake feel. Higher number, understeer feel. And I didn't mention it yet in this video, but being a front, mid or rear engine will affect the brake bias. The Porsche, for example, has the engine in the back, so there is more weight at the rear, which means you can use the rear more in comparison to a traditional front engine car. So for the sake of the video, I'll try to go the other way around, like put it way down to 54. You see, the end wants to rotate much more now. Will become apparent in this corner probably. Held it together. But yeah, the lower number, the more braking performance you get, as well as more instability. So again, you have to find the right compromise. And here is an example of that. My steering wasn't really straight, but still I had to correct my line there. You see the rear wants to swerve now, and that is simply because the brake bias is too much to the rear now. So like I said, you get a bit more braking performance, but that will come at the cost of stability. And you could adjust the brake bias for every corner, but for me personally that is too much of a hassle. And if you forget, you could potentially send yourself into the shadow realm, which is not what you want. So I suggest to find one brake bias and stick with it for the whole lap or the whole race. And if your tires might go off, your rear tires, just put it more to the front for more stability. and 54 on a Merc is already pretty low. For this setup it definitely is too low. Car just wants to rotate a bit too much now. Still I can hold it under control, but it requires a lot of focus, so what I'll do is go to 56 and see if I like it more. And try a few laps. And this is really the work that you have to put in if you want to make a good setup. In the pit, out the pit, in the pit, out the pit, again, in the pit, it, I'll quit. Set up the tire pressures, ride height, roll bars, bump stop range, rate, wheel springs, and I have not even mentioned damping. So yeah, as you can imagine, it is really a time-consuming hobby, but I find it pretty fun, and I think transforming a car into something you like is really rewarding. You can also use it in other games. So yeah, the journey is long, but you might find yourself with a great reward, which makes it really versatile, and it will help you finding the last few tenths maybe in a lap. You see now the tire temperatures on the dashboard have gone from pretty even to slightly uneven. The heat is now more in the back instead of at the front, so that is something to keep in mind as well. Still, these pressures are within range, but this will maybe result in a slightly more unbalanced car. And that is simply because the rear tires are used more for braking now. So instead of relying on the fronts, the rear tires have to work more now, in which case they simply heat up more. So if I would want to keep the rear tires like this, I would have to put some pressure in my front tires. Again, balancing out the front and rear tires, if you want that, of course. So if you are making a setup, there is the possibility to actually save the setup, and you can name it whatever you want. In this case I named mine the 3-try setup, also including the temperature of the air and the track, so it's easier to make an adjustment based on the temperature of the server at the moment you're playing. But we are getting at the end of the video right now, and I've been talking way too much. So with all this being said, I hope you find something interesting here which you can use in your sim racing journey. So what I said, most of the stuff talked about here can also be applied to other games as well, because a car is a car and it will behave pretty much the same. So yeah, as we take a look at the times, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask, because I read every comment and I will try my best to help you with making a good setup. And so the next day after editing, I actually went out on the track and set these times pretty much in the mid 129s, and I feel like I could improve the setup, but that goes beyond the point of this video. So I am going to say goodbye to you. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for being here. Useful links will be in the description. Thank you. Goodbye.